Thank you for joining me today. As we move into the final month of the year, it's a time for reflection on where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. It is certainly clear that 2020 has been a year like no other. We'll be recalling 2020 for the rest of our lives, in part because of the unique combination of challenges we faced. The COVID-19 pandemic, which has so far tragically killed 505 people here in Louisville and sickened another 39,014. It's produced an economic downturn that has hurt jobs and businesses, particularly the tourism and hospitality industries that help fuel our downtown core. The biggest boost to our health and the economy will be a COVID-19 vaccine that's reliable and widely available. That's coming, but we all have to stay healthy and help our businesses survive until that day arrives. We're also working to address an unacceptable increase in gun violence and the tragic loss of life and accompanying sorrow for too many families in our community. And 2020 has been a year when we've experienced righteous demands for racial justice and equity. Over the next few weeks, I'll be detailing our plans for these challenges, which, like everything else in our city, are connected to one another and to Metro government's imperative to address all of these concerns while still achieving operational excellence in the critical services we deliver to the public. Today, I will focus on Metro government's response to a challenge that demands we take further action, creating a city of enhanced racial justice and equity. Advancing racial equity has been a major focus of our work at Metro government for the past 10 years. But it's clear that we need to move faster and invest more resources. We need to do everything we can to repair distrust through action. These messages resonated in the protests that we've experienced in Louisville and cities around the country in the wake of the tragic deaths of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and far too many others. Breonna's tragic death makes our city a focal point for America's reckoning on racial justice. The last few months have been painful for us as a community and for many of us personally. The status quo is not working, nor is it acceptable. But the question is, what do we do now? I believe in the people of Louisville, and while we all do not agree on everything, I believe that we have the will and the shared love for our hometown to take the necessary steps to move forward. I also believe that first step is addressing the pain and the root causes of racism and openly acknowledging its negative weight each and every day. For too many Louisvillians, racism is a fact of daily life, a fact that was created and documented in our country's laws and institutional policies like segregation, redlining, and urban renewal. Laws and policies that restrict the freedom of all Americans to exercise their constitutional rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Laws and policies that can restrict where people live, what schools they attend, what jobs they can get. And laws and policies that effectively limit the wealth they can earn and pass on to their children. As mayor, and just as an American and a human being, this racism sickens me. Just like every other institution, at city government, we have to own our history, all of it, the proud, the painful, and we have to take responsibility for addressing its direct impact on the people of our city. Certainly, overall progress has been made. In recent years, more than 17,000 people in our city have lifted themselves out of poverty, and more than 11,000 Louisville families have joined the middle class. But far too many gaps remain. Here's just a few. The Black poverty rate in Louisville is nearly 3 times the white poverty rate. Blacks make up 22.4% of our population, but only 2.4% of our businesses. The percentage of Blacks who own their own homes is half the percentage of whites. And even among college graduates, the average Black graduate in Louisville earns almost $10,000 less per year than their white colleague. And look at public health, where life expectancy can vary by as much as 12 years between some majority Black and majority white neighborhoods. All of these and millions of other statistics and real-life experiences tell us that our systems are more than broken, they must be dismantled and replaced. That means rethinking how government, business, education, healthcare, and other institutions operate so that we make sure everyone really has a fair and equal shot at the American dream, expanding their opportunities at realizing their full human potential. And right now, sadly, that's not the case. So we have to make these changes in our systems so the American dream and the guarantee of equal justice and the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness become a reality in the lives of everyone in our city. That's why I'm announcing today that I'm signing an executive order declaring racism a public health crisis in Louisville. This order lays out in stark terms the societal, economic, physical, and mental health impacts of racism on not just Black Louisville, but all the people of our city. Let's focus on the economic aspect for a moment. Advancing racial equity is part of any sound economic growth strategy. The United States Chamber of Commerce agrees. The Chamber's website cites a 2018 report from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation that concluded, quote, the United States economy could be $8 trillion larger by 2050 if the country eliminated racial disparities in health, education, incarceration, and employment. The gains would be equivalent to a continuous boost in GDP growth of 0.5% per year, increasing the competitiveness of the country for decades to come. So advancing racial equity in our city strengthens our workforce, improves our tax base, and increases the spending power of our residents. It helps each and every one of us by making our city healthier, creating more opportunities and dignity in work, safer neighborhoods, and by helping us advance our goals as a city dedicated to compassion, to equity, and to justice. At a fundamental level, the protests we've seen are about people feeling the absence of those things in their lives and for generations past. We must always strive to address the long-standing and justifiable grievances behind the protest. And of course, we can't change America by ourselves, but we can show America how a city can change itself. We can channel the energy from the pain we've experienced and take ourselves from tragedy to transformation. But we've got to do more than say just the words. This executive order outlines specific plans for Louisville Metro government to address our racial equity challenges in 7 key areas: public safety, children and families, Black employment, Black wealth, housing and neighborhood investment, health, and voting. Now, of course, Metro government alone won't be able to address every challenge or solve every problem. We must all do this in partnership, and it's great to see the plans and ideas so many others are putting forward. My team and I are committed to promoting racial equity and social justice through every policy that is drafted and approved at all levels of Metro government. We're also committed to continue educating and training Metro employees, staff, and all elected and non-elected officials on how racism and other systems of oppression can affect health, the delivery of human and social services, economic development, public safety, and all other aspects of society. Here are a few examples of the actions we're taking immediately to help dismantle systemic racism in each of our 7 focus areas. In public safety, we partnered with Metro Council to create a civilian review board that provides a new layer of independent review to LMPD disciplinary matters. Next, we'll work with the General Assembly to advocate giving that board subpoena power. We're also hiring a new permanent chief of police to build a culture of guardianship, recruit and retain more police officers of color, and to implement reforms based on both the soon-to-be completed top-to-bottom review of LMPD and the reforms agreed to in our settlement with Breonna Taylor's estate. One of those reforms is instituting a social service model that has social workers assisting police officers as needed and where helpful. We're working to support children and families by investing in Evolve 502 to provide every Louisville child with wraparound personal supports and a college scholarship to Jefferson Community and Technical College or Simmons College, with an emphasis on supporting Black and low-income Louisvillians. We're working to boost Black employment in the jobs of Louisville's future by investing in tech training through the Future of Work Initiative and SummerWorks, as well as programs like Lou Tech Works, Code Louisville, and Tech Louisville. These programs will address the Black pay gap and bring us closer to the day when the city's demographics are more evenly represented in every workplace in our city. Boosting the employment prospects of Black Louisvillians is one of the ways we'll also address the historic injustices that have long limited Black wealth. Metro government and our community partners will work to support Black entrepreneurs and Black-owned businesses through access to capital, technical assistance, training, and more. We'll create more channels for opportunities like our Equity and Contracting and Procurement Task Force, established by my executive order in September, and already working to give minority and women-owned businesses more access to $5 billion worth of capital construction projects over the next 5 years. We're working to create a more equitable economy through our Build Back Better Together initiative. Launched before the protests, Build Back Better Together has organized teams from across our community that have been meeting online for months, focusing on specific areas of our economy and creating recommendations that will incorporate into Metro government strategy moving forward. And let's be clear about one thing here. We're only focused on moving forward. There is no going, quote, back to normal. The Louisville that we were in March wasn't good enough, wasn't equitable enough. Higher standards for equity must be the goal for every aspect of life in our city. That's why we're working to increase Black home ownership through down payment assistance, home financing, and other supports. We'll also advocate for an increase in the woefully inadequate minimum wage and for congressional action on reparations. These are critical aspects of moving toward equity as our investments Metro government is making in basic needs like affordable housing in neighborhoods across our city. In Louisville, we believe that it's not enough to lift up our neighborhoods. We have to lift up our neighbors as well. And that's why, as the Russell revitalization takes shape, we're also supporting anti-displacement efforts through partners like Russell, A Place of Promise, Louisville Central Community Center, One West, and Rebound. The neighborhood development investments we're making also include $21 million to prevent evictions and address homelessness, with additional funds to support homeowners and make improvements to infrastructure and amenities in historically disinvested neighborhoods, again, without displacing the people who live there today. We're working to address public health disparities through our Center for Health Equity, and in particular to reduce disparities in the impact of COVID-19 through public-private partnerships coordinated by our nationally recognized Department of Public Health and Wellness. And while the 2020 election may finally be behind us, we will continue the fight to promote and protect the right to vote and to expand it by advocating for early and mail-in ballot options for every election, as well as other initiatives to ensure everyone has the opportunity to vote. That includes pushing for restored voting rights to those who've paid their debt to society for past criminal convictions, and working with nonpartisan, nonprofit organizations dedicated to preventing voter suppression in any form. Let's be clear. These reforms will need support from people all across our community. We will need advocates in Frankfort for the next session to fight for a state legislative agenda that includes changes to promote transparency and accountability in police-involved disciplinary matters and advance racial equity initiatives, including bail reform and voting rights. These reforms will require a strong commitment and a lot of work, but I believe it can be done. In part because when I look around Louisville and talk to people from every neighborhood and background, I sense a greater and broader understanding and desire to address racial equity than ever before. I see it in the recommendations outlined by many community partners in their letter to local and state leaders entitled A Path Forward, many of whose recommendations are included in our plan. I see it in local companies like Humana, Norton Healthcare, Brown-Forman, Yum Brands, and others who have all made multi-million-dollar commitments to fighting systemic racism in Louisville, and in Greater Louisville, Inc., which has established the Business Council to end racism. I want to thank and encourage all our community partners, along with every business that's looking at its board and management teams to ensure that they represent the community that they serve, and every store, school, and house of worship that's working to make sure each person who walks through their front door is treated with the respect they deserve. To everyone who not only says they're not racist, but who commits to being an anti-racist, which means they're actively working to dismantle racism and oppression. Thank you. These and more are steps we have to take. We have to push ourselves and each other forward and hold ourselves and each other accountable. Because while we can't change the past, we can learn its lessons and change the future. Cornel West, the Black philosopher and activist, said, quote, "None of us alone can save the nation or the world, but each of us can make a positive difference if we commit ourselves to do so." I am deeply committed to do so. I have 2 years remaining in my term as your mayor, and I intend to spend every possible minute of that time working with people and organizations across our community to make our hometown a city of compassion, opportunity, justice, and equity. I want to thank my partners on the Metro Council for their leadership on this issue, particularly Councilwoman Keisha Dorsey for her assistance, not only in the executive order, but for helping lead the charge against systemic racism in all facets of both Metro government and the city as a whole. And I want to thank Kendall Boyd, our city's Chief Equity Officer, for his tireless work in this cause as well. And thanks to all the people of our city who recognize that within the challenges of this moment, there is historic opportunity. Let's seize this moment and transform our city together. So stay strong, Louisville, and thank you. And now it's my honor as mayor to sign this executive order declaring racism a public health crisis in our city. And I'm going to be joined around the table by our Chief for Community Building, Vincent James, our Chief for Performance Improvement, Carmen Moreno Rivera, and our Chief Equity Officer, Kendall Boyd. This is Executive Order number 2020-022, declaring racism as a public health crisis in our city. This will inspire many other cities to do so. This executive order covers many of the points I just made. Our chiefs up here, thank you all for helping us to this point, and all the citizens of Louisville participated in this process as well. The order is official. Thank you all for all the good work on this and getting it done right now. So let's hear from a great partner and a champion of racial justice and equity in our city. I'm happy to be joined by Metro Councilwoman Keisha Dorsey. Councilwoman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to just start by saying her name, Breonna Taylor, to my sister, who I never met, but who has brought race and equity back to the forefront of our kitchen table conversations. We thank you for your sacrifice. To Travis and all of the modern day freedom fighters, on this day, December the 1st, Giving Tuesday, Louisville has given you the greatest gift, and that's our united pursuit of justice. I had a great speech written out, but as the mayor signed the declaration, there was one thing that came to mind, and it's the words of an old Negro spiritual, and I think it's important to state at this moment. To be authentic in my spirit, it just simply says, we shall overcome. We shall overcome one day. Deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome one day. Those words, we, are not relegated to Black. They're not relegated to white, female, or male. It's a unity. It is the calling card for which our nation was declared. We, the people, we shall overcome. So today, all I can simply say is that the day when our great freedom fighter, Martin King, when we can fulfill the words of his speech, when we walk hand in hand and we can all together say, free at last, that will be the day when we are truly one nation under God. We are still fighting to be indivisible, and we are seeking liberty, and we are fighting for justice for all. This is America, and this is my Louisville. Today, Mayor, I am so proud to not just be a Metro Councilwoman, but to be Black in Louisville. It is a good day. And so I will join you and all the pursuits that you have in this. For those that are interested in the legislation that we are crafting, not just Councilwoman Dorsey, please reach out to my office. But today is a gift on Giving Tuesday, and what an apropos day, Mr. Mayor, for you to give Black Louisville, but not only just Black Louisville, for you to give Louisville the gift of equality. There's no big greater gift than that. So we thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Look forward to further collaboration with you. Appreciate your beautiful words. Okay, folks, with that, we'll take questions from the media.
Okay, our first question comes from Darcy Costello with the Courier-Journal. She asks, Mayor Fischer, have you or your team gotten feedback on this plan from protesters, activists, and/or Black community leaders who signed on to the A Path Forward petition? In other words, how was this plan created in partnership with the community?
Thank you, Darcy. This plan was put together over the past several months from much of my staff that has worked with all kinds of community partners, members of the Path Forward on our B3, or our Build Back Better Together team as well. So you see some of our Build Back Better Together in there. Work we've done with affordable housing advocates, obviously the work that we're doing around police reform in terms of civilian review, search for a new police chief. The other reforms are in here. So what you see here is a compilation of the work that we've been doing for months and months with various community partners, and then some new concepts as well that we think are going to help us push forward more toward racial equity.
Our next question comes from Denny Camper with WLKY. She asks, does this executive order declaring a public health crisis make any additional funding available to Louisville Metro to address any of the issues laid out?
Yeah, the budgeting aspect of this is something we'll be discussing with the Metro Council. One of the reasons why we're announcing this now is we're approaching the new budget season, so we want to make sure that we're aligned with the work of Councilwoman Dorsey and many others, but we're announcing new things like increased investment in affordable housing is one example. And so as we've talked with various council people on this, I feel like we're going to have good support behind the plan.
Okay, our next question comes from Amina Alahi with WFPL. She asks, what is the timeline for achieving the goals and action steps you're committing to today?
That's a great question. Look, this work is going to be going on for as long as I'm mayor and as long as whomever the next mayor is, and beyond that as well. Now, there's some immediate actions in here that you can see have been affected. For instance, the creation of a civilian review board has passed the council now. It's been signed. It will be signed into law, and then it will be funded. So that's something where you can say, okay, that's done. The process has started. Many of these other issues that address long-standing issues with or impacts from racism, let's say the life expectancy gap, that work's going to have to go on for long periods of time. So as we work through this process and we work through the next budget with the council and share our goals and plans for this next calendar year and fiscal year, you can see how we'll be planning these all out by short term and long term.
Okay, Amina has the follow-up question to that other question. How will the public be able to measure the success of this plan? What types of updates or reports will Metro provide?
Yeah. So again, a plan comes to life in a budget. So the first step will be, what does FY22's budget look like? How do we also then continue with some of this work within what plans we've got going on right now? How do we report what our goals are to the community, which we do every year? So this work will just be incorporated to part and parcel of what our daily work is and our continuous improvement work is as Metro government.
And the next question comes from Denny Camper with WLKY. She asks, how confident are you that there will be support for some of these reforms in the General Assembly, which is overwhelmingly Republicans?
That's going to be an area where we're going to need all Louisvillians to help. Not all Louisvillians, but all folks that believe in equity. And I believe whether you're Democrat or Republican, you believe in equity. You believe that everybody should have a fair shot, and that not everybody's had a fair shot in the past before. And the only way that we're going to realize our potential in Louisville or Kentucky is if everybody has that degree of equity and resources that are required to do that. So I realize we've got some work to do with Frankfurt. It's part of a legislative agenda that we're going to be putting forward. And I just ask everybody to help. I can tell you that we will be there arguing and fighting for more equity and more resources, change of state laws that can help us in specific areas. But It's never easy in Frankfurt or any legislative body, but it's a lot easier when a lot of people are helping.
The next question is from Spectrum News 1. You've made a plan, but also chose to make this an executive order. Why did you choose to do this versus just lay out a racial equity plan?
To emphasize the importance of combating racism in every form. An executive order puts that exclamation point, a point of emphasis on the importance of this work. It's a clear direction to the departments within Metro government that when they put together their plans, the executive order goes to the top of the list in terms of a filter for what their priorities are and what their budget recommendations are. It's also a way to get more public notice of what's taking place so that when a business reads the plan or a house of worship becomes aware of the plan, that they might say, let's us take a look at that and see how we can impact our work around equity. Because I can say, in my lifetime, there has never been more conversation taking place and nor more action taking place in the community around racial equity and racial justice. Is it enough? It's never going to be enough. We've got 400 years of history to make up for. But this is a time where people are attuned to justice and making the type of investments and changes that are required to move us further in that direction. And I believe an executive order gives the impact to that work that's appropriate and necessary. And I hope everybody tunes into it and asks themselves, how can we get aligned with this effort?
Okay, right now we have one more question in the chat. So media, if you would like to, if you have any other questions, please type those in, addressed to everyone. Amina Alahi with WFPL asks, how will you adapt if you do not get the changes you need from the General Assembly?
Well, there's an awful lot of work in this executive order that we can do without the General Assembly. So I'm not concerned about that. We can continue with, let's take for an example, subpoena power. The work of the Civilian Review Board can continue whether they have subpoena power or not. Subpoena power makes it more impactful if they have to use that, but we can still do that work. So this is not a situation where if we face one obstacle, we're going to stop this work. There is years and years of work in this executive order and unlimited passion to get the work done as well. That's what excites me about this time that we're living in right now, that so many people are focused on creating a better city and a better country. So whether it's an obstacle we face with the General Assembly, in the city, in the state, whatever, we're not going to let that stop us. This is good work that needs to be done. We've been focusing on this work for a long time, but clearly we need to do more, and we're going to do more.
Okay, and Mayor, that's the last question in the chat.
Okay, thanks to the media for joining us today. Thank you, Councilwoman Dorsey, again. Thank you to all the citizens of Louisville that have been focusing on justice and forward movement. It makes us all better. Thank you.